My guest today is another outstanding employee from the company I work for, Fairway Independent Mortgage. And I can't wait to get into her story. Some of the most impactful interviews I've done on this podcast have been with individuals whose legacy traces back to a family member in the very recent past who came to America. And it's really interesting. I don't know this, but I can't wait to hear how that may impact my guest today's why, because there's a couple other people that I've talked to, and it was a huge impact on their why, living up to the immigrant status of their grandparents and making sure that they are creating a lineage for their family generationally down the lines. Before I introduce, very quick quote. This one's from Jim Rohn. Mr. Rohn says, being able to turn a failure into a positive experience that you learn from can be the difference between success and failure. A lot of the guys that I read specifically address your attitude towards the things that are around you. What got me into Stoicism was this idea that I was in control of how I reacted to stimulus, and how you react to situations that you find yourself in, by and large, indicates how you're going to get out of them and how you will feel when you get out of them, be it success, be it failure, be it hard times or good times. If you're consistent in your demeanor and your attitude and your goal orientation, all of those things are just experiences as you go through life that don't necessarily define who you are and don't define your personality or your self-worth, but rather they're just another step along the path that you're taking towards life. My guest today is Jen Gile. Jen did this really awesome letter to the entire company that the CEO used to do called Keep Playing. Last year, he invited employees of Fairway to partake in that and share their message with the entire company on a day-to-day basis. Jen's Keep Playing specifically referenced her lineage and her grandparents, great-grandparents coming to America. I don't want to spoil that by talking about it, but first, Jen, man, we're both very busy this time of year in our industry and where we find ourselves in the industry. So thank you for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here, especially based on the amazing people you've had on here. So thank you for asking me.
Of course. Now, I want to do a very quick recap summary of what you and I talked about to get into some of the details. So you are from originally Chicago. Interestingly, went to an all-girls Catholic school through high school. I want to hear just a little, we didn't get into this, but I want to hear a little bit about this. So you said that it was literally 550 girls in a town of how many people?
Well, so it was very close to downtown Chicago. So it was a big area, but we drove almost 50 minutes to get to the school. So it's not close, right? I mean, that's a pretty long commute to high school every day. But my mom really, we're going to get to talking about her, but she's one of the most amazing, strong women I know. And she wanted us to go to a place where we didn't feel uncomfortable raising our hands, or we weren't concerned about how we were looking in school or getting wrapped up in boys, which of course high school girls do sometimes, and wanted it to just be about strong women succeeding. And there's so many amazing women that have come out of this high school. If you were to like track the alumni, it's unbelievable. So that's why we went there. But it was a sacrifice. It was expensive for them, and it was, again, lots of car rides, considering they're the ones who had to drive us. There's no buses that take you 50 minutes to school. So.
No, sometimes we wish there would. Now that I'm a parent, it's like, oh man, it'd be nice to have my. So when you were going to that school, you grew an affinity for sports, and specifically volleyball, and that affinity in the same generation as you. And as you said that there wasn't really this idea that, number one, we were going to go to college. I mean, yes, it was kind of ingrained in us, but it was our decision ultimately. It wasn't the standard of the educational system. And number two, it wasn't expected that you would get a scholarship for whatever sport you were playing or for your scholastics. And not only did you go to college, but you also got a scholarship for volleyball, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was a total surprise, and I think I I hope that our world goes back to that a little bit and that people are playing for the joy of playing and not the expectation of having college paid for. It was a shock to my parents. Play just turned out to be a natural sport for me. And about sophomore year, just all the letters, of course, it was all letters back then, no social media, no one's making videos, started coming in. And really it was such a neat experience because some of the memories that I have of high school are going on those recruiting trips, which you could do back in the day, with my parents. So some of the trips we went on and the amazing memories I have with them were going on these trips to visit different schools. So it was it's a neat opportunity. And to this day, the best friends I have in life are my teammates. So I'm so thankful for that opportunity because one, it's just a neat thing to do. And such a small percentage of the population gets to do that. It opened lots of doors. It connected me to lots of people, but the best friendships I have and some of the best lessons I learned were from the ability to play sports. So I'm grateful for it.
It's interesting that I just had an interview with a swimmer who was in a very different sports arena, right? When you're a swimmer, it's very self-oriented. You are the motivating factor to your success. Now she went on to compete at a level where there was teams involved in relays and other things. But I think there is a definite difference. I played a team sport as well. I played lacrosse, and yeah, those people that you play with every single day and go through the hardships of ups and downs, good days, bad days, lifting each other up when you're down, man. Some of the brotherhood that we got from that was, like you, was amazing. So got the scholarship, ended up going to University of Iowa, played obviously volleyball at University of Iowa, and finished your bachelor's program, began a master's program, and decided or knew at that point that wasn't the path you wanted to go down. Can you share a little bit about that transition of, okay, I'm done, I'm doing masters, and now I want to change?
Sure. So, I'm a doer and I have a very small amount of patience for a lot of things. I don't like to wait, something I'm working on my whole life. And so I started school, and the program that I was in, it was going to take 7 to 8 years to get all the way through to do what I wanted to do. And that just seemed like an exponential amount of time to just be in school. I love to work. Even when I retire from this job, I'll coach or work. I love working. I do. And I wanted to work. I want to get out in the world. So decided it wasn't for me, but really didn't know what was. Came home for the summer. Like I said, I waitressed. My mom always believed that you should wait tables because you learn how to treat people. And of course, it's a way to make great money. So waited tables over the summer while I was interviewing for jobs. Had no idea what I wanted to do. Again, I was a psych major, and I interviewed with a gentleman that was connected to me who's doing mortgage loans. And I went down to their fancy office overlooking the city. And, the two things that he said that stuck out to me were, you can make as much money as you want based on how hard you work, which I appreciated because I wanted to be able to do more, win, competitive person. And then the hours, he said 10 to 8. And at the time I was not a morning person. So I could dial the phone until 9 or 10 o'clock whenever it was appropriate, but I didn't want to be, doing it at 7 in the morning. So that was the only two things I knew about it. I took the job. They handed me a desk, a phone, and a calculator. There was maybe 2 hours of training where we did a application hand 1003 form. You're using a pen back then. Literally, that was it. And they're like, go. No training. So I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but there were two particular loan officers in the office who were the most successful. They just so happened to be women. And it was really only because they were working, by relationship, by referral, which I didn't know what that meant at the time. I didn't know that there was a system behind it, but I just watched them and saw how they cared about people. I'm like, all right, I can do this. So grew the business really just by connecting with people, with having I could barely use a financial calculator, which is scary to say now, right? Such an important transaction and not have training. But that was a different time than now. So that's how I got into it. And here we are 23 years later.
So when you decided to not finish getting your master's after committing to going to school and getting your bachelor's and getting the scholarship, I'm sure understanding that your parents were involved in that transition to going to school and getting a scholarship and making the decision ultimately where to go. Was there any kind of rebuttal or any negative repercussion that came from mom and dad when you made that decision and just said, I'm coming home?
No, my mom wanted me to stay in school longer because she had such a hard life. And I know we're going to get to that. She knew school was much easier than the real world. And she wanted me to be able to not have to rush to working all the time. And she said, I will never forget that. She's like, why are you hurrying? Like, you don't have to worry about paying for it. They've paid for it. Your dad and I saved money. If you want to keep going to school, like, don't rush out into the real world because it's not exactly what you think it is. And of course, when you're 21, you know everything. And so I wanted to rush out and work. And then I got out in the work world. And I'm like, this is quite a bit different than you think. We always think we know everything. And then 5 years later, we look back and think, man, was I sort of clueless. So they weren't mad. I think in the summer, as I was waitressing, interviewing for jobs, my dad definitely wanted me to find something quicker. We had a pool. And so I'd work the night shift waitressing because you'd make more money on the dinner shift. And I'd be at the pool all day. So it was very hard for him to, he's a business owner, watch me by the pool as a college graduate, not getting a job. But we're talking about 2.5 months, maybe. And they knew that they had instilled the work ethic. They weren't worried, but I think, again, they're not necessarily patient people either. And so they're like, come on, let's go, figure it out.
I think our generation was one of the first that established this reality that the work life and job doesn't mean 9 to 5.
Right.
Doesn't mean this regimented, standardized thing that prior generations had been raised thinking. And we really began that at a much younger age and at a much earlier time, understanding that, hey, I could do this work, kind of the gig economy before it actually existed, right? And we knew that, and our parents, mine were the same way. We're very rebellious to that fact because it didn't fit into their box of what it meant to work and what it meant to earn a living by that standardized definition, right?
What's cool, though? My mom was always very ahead of her time, and that she'd say things to me like, you don't need to get married in your 20s, because there's this thing, especially for women, you're in your 20s, it's, oh my God, I need to get married. And the next, oh my God, I need to have kids. I never felt that way. She always said to me, I don't even see you having kids until you're older because we want to travel. And I know career is important to you. And there's nothing wrong with that. Jennifer, you should not have kids until you are 100% ready for them and have gotten all your selfish things out. And so I did. I got married later. I had kids in my mid-30s, which, like we talked about, I'm grateful for a variety of reasons. I'm smarter, I'm more patient, we're more financially established, a little less physically, capable. But I never felt like I had to follow those society guidelines that they put on you. So I never felt that from my mom. I didn't feel that pressure to hurry up and get a job and hurry up and get married. And I'm lucky because I know that's not the case for many women my age,
Yeah, so I want to fast forward a little bit. You got that job in the mortgage industry, a couple months out of college. Your sister at that time, who you were very close with and grew up together and went to school together, went somewhere else for school, and you decided, number one, you wanted to be closer to her, your best friend, and number two, it was time to move away from Chicago and the empire that you had built there. So when you made that move and that transition to be closer to your sister, that kind of began the current season of life where you are, right? You met your husband, the two of you had children. And in fact, the coolest really cool to hear that you and your sister had your oldest children within like how many days of each other?
10 days. Yeah, she has.
Was there any strategics involved in this, or was this purely chance?
It was purely chance. They had been trying for a while, and we weren't sure if I'd be able to have kids. Full disclosure, I had some reproductive challenges according to doctors, and it just turned out by the grace of God that we got pregnant very quickly, and they got pregnant right when they needed to. And I really think it was meant to be. Her kids were born May 5th. She has triplets, and my son was born May 15th. So they are literally in the same school, same class. And then she had two more kids because she's a little insane. And her next child is 6 months older than our youngest child. And they live a mile away. And literally we spend time with them all the time. They're all best friends. So it's just the neatest. It's just really special. So.
Yeah, it is. It's living close to my parents. I realize how much of a blessing it is, and how many memories are created for our kids by having this really close-knit group of people, whether it's family, whether it's a neighborhood, whatever it is. That's what those memories are made of when you're in that 6 to 12 age bracket, spending time with them and with family. So all of these events leading up to where you are now were made possible by you having an ancestor that decided to uproot their entire family and come to America and change. How much of that story were you told? How much of that story did mom pass on to you? How much of where you find yourself and the experiences that you've gone through up to this point are impacted by that? We didn't talk about this at all, so I'm really interested to hear this part of the story outside of what I read from what you wrote for our company. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So my great-grandparents came over from Ireland to America. And so technically and they had some children at that point. Technically I'm third generation, but there were, all the generations before me were just in poverty. I mean, they worked full-time jobs, sometimes 2 and 3 jobs, but it's very difficult when you have nothing, of course, to build it, especially if you're having children young and building a family. And so of course my great grandma, like they did back in the days, had kids, I want to say she had her first at 19. It's very difficult to get out of that cycle of poverty when you have 5 kids, have nothing to start with, and you're working minimum wage, and trying to assimilate to our culture here. Of course, they spoke differently and just had many different traditions and things. So the special part of it is my mom's story, really, because her parental situation was, kind of a horrific one, to be honest. And she's not at all resentful of it, which is the part that's unbelievable to me. But her dad left when all the kids were very young, just walked out of the family. She had no relationship with him and didn't even know him until she was much older. Started another family and just walked away. Mom worked full-time, tried to manage, eventually developed a very serious drinking problem, which is, of course, many people get sucked into that when it seems hopeless. And so was a functioning alcoholic, is the way my mom will explain it. She'd work all day. She'd go to the bar after work, get just shellacked, come home and not parent at all. And so the kids at a very young age were left to fend for themselves. Of course, single mom, 4 kids. My mom was the youngest, 3 brothers above her. My mom ended up being the mom. So she's the one who would make the meals. And, there were many times where the kids were going around the neighborhoods, digging out of trash cans for bottles and cans to return for pennies so they could buy bread, which is insane to me because it's the opposite of any reality I've ever had. But she did tell us these stories because she didn't want us to forget where she came from, where we came from, and develop a sense of entitlement. So we went to Catholic private schools, right? That there's a certain stigma with that. I went to an all-girls private school. We were on traveling club volleyball teams, you know, anything we wanted to do, dance lessons, softball team. They worked and sacrificed so that we could do those things. And we, you know, eventually my dad was a custom home builder. Eventually we lived in what we call the big house and joined a country club. And I mean, our life changed, all these things that have kind of stigmas associated with them, right? The country club was to generate clients for my dad's business. It wasn't so we could golf. It was a networking thing, right? And he was working that, and our family was working that. But she never let go of those stories, and she never stopped trying to impact other people in those situations, because she felt like that was her purpose. So I don't think that I've ever been entitled. Do I like nice things? Am I used to nice things? Yes. But she also instilled the work ethic in us that, P.S., this isn't handed to you. You know, your father and I are going to work so hard so you can have a different, easier life than we did, but you're still going to have to work. You're still going to have to make it your own. And one of the things my mom also instilled in me, and I don't want this to come across the wrong way, is, you know, like, you need to work. You need to have your own money. This is not like go to college, meet a man, get married, you need to have your own stuff, be in charge of your own finances and your own life, and build something together. But don't ever not have that drive and that independence yourself. Because my mom raised herself, right? I mean, she raised herself from the time she was very young. She left when she was 18, which is as soon as she could leave. Her mom had since gotten remarried to a drunk, had another child she was helping to raise, and she felt so torn leaving him. But she went to college. She waitressed to pay her way through college, eventually met my dad, and, you know, so I'm kind of rambling, but that is really, there's never been a day where I don't get up and know I need to grind it out. That competitive sense of like, what can we now do for our children? So our kids have a completely different life than even I had, but it is not you're handed this, you know, you have an iPhone when you're 8 years old, which they don't. No judgment, but my kids do not. But they're going to work. Like, we write goals. We have chore charts. They're going to learn the same things I did. And they're going to hear about their Gaga, which is my mom, and her life, so that they don't forget that that's where we came from. Because I don't have those same stories. But they're going to hear from her and from me continuing to tell that when she's gone, because I don't want them to be entitled either.
Man, thank you for sharing that story. It's really cool and amazing to hear. I think one thing that we may or may not do a good job of as a society is remembering the sacrifices that were made generations ago. We're very present in the here and now with what we're doing and dealing with here and now. And a lot of us don't have those stories of what happened in the early 1900s directly with our family and the sacrifices that were made by our family to allow our grandparents and then our parents and then us to realize the life that we live. And truly, the most profound stories that I have heard have been from recent immigrants, third or fourth generation back, where their story is still being carried forward because it's still fresh. I think, you know, when you're 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th generation, all of a sudden that story no longer has the same impact because it's not as present in the mind of the children and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. When you look back on the stories that Mom told and the way that she told them, there's something powerful about the way you said this, and I want to hit on this again, is that she would tell these stories, but the emotion that was behind the way she told the stories was not filled with bitter resentment or animosity. Wouldn't you think that going back and relaying these stories would be hard for her?
She is the most, and I mean this not because she's my mom, she's the most truly amazing human being I've ever met. If I were to list all of the terrible things that have happened to her, you wouldn't even believe it. And the craziest piece about it is every one of the people who wronged her, in our opinion, right, she took care of. So her mom got cancer. My mom took care of her until she died. Her stepfather, also a drunk, right? Not a great man, on paper, same thing. She took care, he was in her home on hospice until his very last breath. She is, I'm getting emotional. Sorry, I'm a crier. She is just the most unbelievable woman. And so when I feel anger towards someone or feel resentment, which is, it's a normal emotion that we have sometimes, I have to think about being more like her, because no matter what happened to her, she never used it as an excuse. She never took it to a negative place. It was always, they made mistakes. They came from nothing. What the examples that they had weren't, great to get them started. They had a hard life. It's always almost making excuses for their behavior and just using it as a life lesson. But I will tell you, it made her the very best parent. Everything that she did and still does was so her kids had a different life. She moved here to Chicago. She lived in my sister's house. She's helped us raise the grandkids. She has 7 of them since the day they were born. And there is nothing that she doesn't do to make our lives easier. If we go on a trip, we come home, she has stocked our fridge. She has cleaned our house. She has done any laundry. Why? She said, well, Mom, or my mom will say, well, Jen, you're getting home. You're going to be tired from your trip. And I just wanted you to come home to have all these things. Still, she's 73 and she still is doing all of these things because she wants it to be easier for us. It's just the most amazing example.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you kind of answered it already. I wanted to ask why you thought she was able to look back on these events that anyone else would be fully rationalized in their own mind and in the minds of everyone around them to say, yeah, she full on deserves to be bitter and resentful, right? And you would look at that person and hear their story and acknowledge and recognize that it's okay for them to be that way because of their story. And yet here Mom is, having gone through these things, would be fully rationalized to have the exact opposite stance on life. And yet here she is not going down that path. And I think you answered this, but I want to be sure. It sounds like it's all directly because of her ability to empathize with other people's situation, and put herself maybe not in their shoes because she doesn't know their whole story. And maybe you kind of said this, maybe it is making excuses for them, but she's able to give, here's a better way of saying it, she's able to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Do you think that that's truly why she's able to rise above her circumstance and be the way she is despite what she's gone through?
Yes, I do. And I will also tell you, because I think this is an important lesson, and one of the biggest lessons I've had is that you need to find a mentor and then you need to be a mentor, right? My mom had 2 people come into her life during hard times that changed it for her. One was a nun in the school they went to back in the day who pushed her to apply for a scholarship to college to help pay for college and pushed her to go to college. So she went to DePaul University, got a little help, and then waitressed to pay for the rest of it. That person was the first person to believe in her, she'll tell you, and really tell her that she was good, even though there was all this bad around her. And when you have someone who believes in you like that, there really isn't, and for me, that was my mom, there really isn't anything you can't do. So I think it was knowing that she can be that person for other people, and she wanted to change that cycle versus being negative or being resentful. You just never know the impact that you can have on someone when you meet someone. And when my mom does, go to heaven, which she surely will, there will be thousands of people that come out of the woodwork to tell us and have already told us the impact that she's had on their lives. And to me, that's that's what you shoot for, right? Sorry, I'm getting
So who
emotional.
was the, no, that's okay. Who was the second person? You referenced the nun. Who was number two?
The second person was my dad. And, she has reasons to be angry at him at this point, which we won't get into, but he loved her. And it was the first man to really love her without any expectation. So she also had been sexually abused more than one time as a kid from strangers and from family, and I just can't even imagine that. So she was broken. She was a very broken person. And when they met, he believed in her so much and loved her at such a hard level for who she was without trying to, and made her feel safe so that she could go pursue teaching, which she loved, and that she could then eventually be a mom and know that he would, their roles were different than the roles we have in our house. My dad was the main provider, and she really wanted to work but be a mom too, but not have the career, have to fund the life, so she could focus more on the mom. And he made her feel safe. So those two people really changed it. Just two people and hundreds of people in our life that weren't great. That's all it takes, one or two.
This is a very common theme among people that I've interviewed on the podcast. Of there's someone in their life who came along and created a fork in the road for them, where they thought that the road they were going down was the only path, and that they were destined to live a life that was down that road. And somebody else came along and pointed out to them that not only is there a fork in the road, but there's hundreds of roads that you may choose from for your path from this point forward with your life. And it's amazing to exactly your point, that once you've had that experience happen to you, you feel the need to also then therefore do it for other people. You want to go out and help others understand that this isn't it, that there is more to it, that there is more opportunity out there than the road that they're on and the vision that they see at the end of that road. So cool. Thank you for sharing her story and why she's able to be who she is for you and for other people. And having heard all this, I mean, I almost want to just jump up and have you yell at us what your why is, because understanding what's influenced you and how you've been raised and the life you've led that has been very intentionally supported by such a loving parent. I'd love for you to just share with us now your why, please.
Sure. So it took me a while to get here. So I just want to say, for anybody who doesn't know the answer to that question yet, I think sometimes people try to make it easier than it is. And it's a process, and sometimes it changes, right? I mean, mine has changed over the years. My why at this point is I really do want to impact as many lives in a positive way, while also being an incredibly involved mom. And the cool part about it is mortgage is just the vehicle that puts me in front of so many people that I can help impact their financial future, their emotional status, right? We're dealing with people going through divorce and loss and many, many hard things. And we get to be sort of that therapist, that financial coach. And it's so cool because it happens to be what I do, but it really is just the vehicle that I use to get in front of all those people. And it's so important for me with my why that, yes, I am competitive. I want to be a top producing, bad mammer jammer, mortgage person. But I also want to be the mom that my mom was, to where my kids look back and say, I watched my mom do these things, but she never missed anything. And my mom, these people come to talk to my kids about the impact that I've made on their lives. So they know when I am away from them at work, it's not for nothing. It's not just for income. It's truly to create this difference in people's lives. And the career is so flexible that it allows me to do both. I never miss a class party. I never miss a field trip. We go on a bunch of family trips every year. I'm off at Christmas. That's what's so great about our industry is you can be, I'm never going to probably be the number one salesperson, right? And that's okay. I can be in the top and still have this incredibly blessed life that's full of momming and being a daughter and being a sister and great friendships. And you can't do it all at different points. It's, you know, different levels of balance, like I talked about in my email as well. But that's my why. It took me a really long time to say it, but sorry.
No, so you hit on this, and I always like to ask this because there are individuals that I've interviewed who knew their why at age 7. And this was their why through the entirety of their life. They knew this was it. And on the flip side of that, there are people who've had dozens of iterations of their why as they've gone through seasons of life. So obviously, prior to being a parent, this would not have been your why. If you look back on Jen when she was a teenager, was there a why that was defined at that point? Was there one in your 20s or prior to being a parent? Or is this something that an exploration that you truly went down when you became a parent?
You know, I don't think I understood it back in the day, but it's much easier to look back, of course, and say, I think that I've always been a connector, right? If you read the book, The Go-Giver, and there's the character that connects everybody, that's always been sort of a natural role for me. And you don't necessarily understand the power of that role until you see it transition into something different. So I've connected friendships that have become so impactful that they've changed someone's lives. I've connected people who went into business together. I've connected people who were sort of lost and weren't in a group. And the cool part, again, is I get to do that both through the boys in the school and with mom groups or the sports teams that are on. I get to do that through my work. We have client events for our work. That's our main thing that we do for marketing. And I can't tell you how many times we'll have someone come to an event by themselves, which is incredibly courageous to do. And they'll pull me aside and say, thank you for including me. I don't really get invited to things. And we find someone to connect them to at the party and make sure that they're, you know, building a new friendship. So I think I was always good at that, and just didn't know how to, that's leverage isn't the right word, but just didn't know how to really use the power to its full capacity until I had the kids and the business, because the kids make you dial in your time, right? So if I connect a bunch of people together and every time they get together, they're reminded that we're the ones who connected them, they stay in your top of mind, you're in their top of mind more. They connect me more in business. They think about me more in business. So my business has grown from helping other people connect and create different relationships simply by saying, hey, William really likes outdoorsy stuff. And John over here likes to go fishing, but doesn't have a fishing buddy. You need to meet William. Like, you guys should go. Hey, I swear to God, you get along. Getting them in the room together, all of a sudden you guys are going on fishing trips, texting me pictures of the big fish you catch, and you're both sending me business, right? It allows me to have more time with the kids because I don't have to always go find the business. I've created these relationships by connecting people, so the business comes and I can still be at all the events.
No, I love that. There's something to be said for having little sprinkles of what you might be good at when you're a kid and when you're in your 20s. But you haven't yet defined it. You haven't yet articulated it. You can't quite put your finger on it. And it's funny because during those years, we're always asked, like, what do you want to do? What are you good at? And it's always such a struggle during those years to be able to answer those questions. And it's funny, you said this, as you look back and, you know, hindsight being 20/20, you look back and go, oh yeah, I can see this, this, and this, that ultimately point to me being good at what I'm good at today. And having that person to help you find that is especially important when you're in that age. And I think that's the original origin of school and college, is exposing you to a multitude of things so that you can find that thing that you might be really good at. So is there a point understanding that during this season right now, you're in the parenting zone. Do you believe that there will be a point a decade from now or 2 decades from now where you will hang your hat and say, I did it, my why is fulfilled, time to move on to the next iteration? Or do you think that this is a lifelong endeavor that will never, ever end?
I think it's a lifelong endeavor, and I feel like you and I are similar in this place, right? The great thing about Fairway is they have the coaching platform. I've been coached for years. I've always wanted to coach. I coached sports back in the day, but now, I'm just dipping my toe in that water of coaching some people. I think eventually that'll be a platform that's so great because I can share with them all of the many things I did wrong and hopefully speed up their process, because it took me a long time to figure it out, right? And I didn't have the great mentors I have now early on. So that piece is cool. But I also think for some reason, there's always been a tug in me. And I think you have this same thing just in getting to know you a little bit. I'm supposed to do something more. I don't exactly know what it is, but I do know that in me, there's the ability to change people in a great way. And I can see in people things sometimes they can't see in themselves. I'm only good at 3 things, right? But that's one of them. And whether that's writing or speaking or creating something, I haven't figured that part out yet, but it's in there and it's this burning desire. I just don't have time to fuel it at the moment because I am in the mom mode and I'm not going to miss that time. But when the kids are in college and don't want to talk to mom anymore, maybe it's high school, I don't know, hopefully not. I am going to do something bigger than me. I just don't know what it is yet. So the cool place is where we're at. You've got the most amazing CEO on the planet. You've got Sarah Middleton, like there's all the other coaches in the Ignite program. There's all these people that you can go and talk to these things about who can help you figure it out, which is so neat.
Yeah, I love that analogy of there's this fire burning inside for something, and that it is what motivates you beyond the current season, right? Because we find ourselves in the parenting zone right now, right? And it's different than babydom where you've got a newborn in the house. And as I've progressed through these seasons of life and also seasons of being a parent, I'm keenly aware of the zone that I'm in, the season that I'm in, but also that there is something beyond this where I have a fire lit for me to go to when this season is moving on to the next one. Yeah, totally can relate to that. Really cool way of putting it. I haven't heard it put that way before, though. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? Anything else you'd like to summarize or points you'd like to make from your email or things I didn't hit on?
I think for anybody who may be struggling, I want to be totally transparent about this. Sometimes people from the outside look like they have everything together. And I'm sure you get this too. People will say to me, oh, your life's perfect. And, in our picture, it's airbrushed and my kids are dressed up. Whereas when they're at home, they're always in clothes that are covered in something and gym shorts. And yes, I have a great career. Yes, I have some great friends. That doesn't mean it didn't come without struggles or it still doesn't. I struggle with mood sometimes for no reason at all. I've struggled with depression over my life, which I have no problem sharing. And so for anyone who's like struggling and don't feel like they're where they want to be, just so you know, I don't feel like I'm where I want to be. I'm very grateful for all the things I have, but that doesn't mean that I still don't wish I had more patience with the kids this morning or wish that I had done more volume last year because we could have. It's this work in progress, right? Which is why I have a coach, which is why I have mentors and accountability partners. I sometimes think when I listen to podcasts or read books, they make it seem so easy. Like, oh, get a coach and read this book. And next year you're going to, look like a model and be the #1 loan officer in the company. That's not real. And so I just want to say that I struggle with those things too. The same things everybody else does. And sometimes at a higher level, because then I'm mad at myself for even feeling bad because I feel so grateful for all the blessings I have. And I'll say, Jen, what is wrong with you? Like, how could you be having a bad day you have so many blessings, right? And I just want to make sure people don't think that I'm not without flaws or that we're not without challenges, because that's 100% not true. And if you're not there yet, you have time. You know, it took me 23 years I've been doing this. Good Lord, I feel like I didn't know what I was doing until last year. I mean, it's probably not true, but every year I look back and think, how did I not get that? Like, what? I'm a smart person. What's wrong with you? Why is it taking me so long to figure this out? And just don't judge people. You know, don't judge people by how they look on the outside, or and what their life may seem, or social media, you know, it's all the highlights. Don't be impacted by that at all, because it's not real. And everybody, no matter where they are, even our CEO, right? He has struggles, he has challenges. That's normal. So thank you so much for letting me do this too. It's fun.
Oh, it's great. That's the perfect way to bring us home. I think you hit the nail on the head with summarizing that we're not where we want to be, and that where we were isn't part of the story that people see now, isn't part of the vision that people see now. So it's very easy to look at someone when they have a home and a car and a job, but not have learned the struggle that they went to realize those things, or in your case, that their family generationally went through to realize those things. It's so important, and very wise words. Almost sounded like your mom there. Don't judge.
That's a compliment.
Don't judge. Have empathy, and understand that the struggle is in everyone, right? Everyone has that voice of the naysayer. Everyone has the ability to go down the road of negativity. And we all struggle with that every single day, especially in the mornings with get your shoes on, brush your teeth.
Same thing every day. Why is it so hard? Yeah.
So funny.
I am the patience. You'll get there. It gets better. And then it's different.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Grateful for you.